Welcome in, Kevin Ingram. Pleased to be joined by Belmont University faculty athletics representative and fellow voice of the Bruins, Dr. Rich Tyner. And of course, Dr. Tyner is currently serving on the NCAA Division I Council. Rich, welcome. Great to see you as always.
Thank you, Kevin. Same here. And when I grow up, I want to be as good as Kevin Ingram. That's my goal in life.
I think you may have that reversed. I say the same thing about you. Rich and I have been great friends for a long time. It's been always great to see him and work with him around Belmont for all these years. You talk about this role with the NCAA Division I Council. I'm sure that's evolved and changed quite a bit since you started, a couple of years back.
Absolutely. Beth DeBush and I have this kind of running joke right now when she asked me if I would consider serving on the D1 Council. She said it's about 4 meetings a year and it doesn't take up a whole lot of time, and it'd be a fun experience for you. And it is a fun experience, but boy, the way things have changed since 2018, it's the plate is full. Plate is very full.
What are some of the takeaways from the Division I Board of Directors last week in terms of eligibility and fall championships and the things that got decided there?
Well, here's the thing. All through this entire process with COVID-19, and really this even goes back to last spring, Kevin, the student-athlete welfare and safety and health have been the primary considerations, and the student-athlete experience. And so as you look at something like this coronavirus that, boy, there's so many unknowns, so many questions that we really don't have answers to. And when the decision is ultimately made to, kind of pull the plug or postpone or whatever, that's really the first question that comes to mind. What about the student athletes? What about what's good for them? And so the council recommended, and then the board of directors took up that recommendation and passed it ultimately last week to basically make it as flexible as possible for the student athlete. So in a sense, for fall sports athletes, no matter how many games get played, and the reason I say that is that, there may be some teams that and some conferences that play some sports, and really no matter how many get played, the student athletes are getting the option this year, getting a pass this year in terms of using a season of eligibility. So what that means is that a couple of things. For one, they won't lose a season of eligibility. The second part is it extends the 5-year clock. A student athlete at Division I level has 5 years to complete 4 years of eligibility, and this will extend that by a year. So they also not only have an extra season, but they have an extra year to get that season in. And then there are ramifications on, sports that have a limited roster size and things. These student athletes that come back, the seniors that come back, won't count against those roster sizes. So it's the most flexible option possible, similar to what was done last spring, even though the spring sports did get part of a season played. This is similar action to what was done with the student athletes in spring. And I probably should mention that all of this is permissible. And by that, what I'm saying is the universities have the option they have that extra year of eligibility. But in terms of when it comes down to the end and that 5th year, the institution has the option as to what that what that scholarship might be, or it could be less, and so forth. So it's what we call permissible legislation.
There seems to be, there's some thought of, like, say, a sport like soccer, going ahead and playing in some leagues in the fall versus moving it to the spring. How does all that fit together?
From the big picture point of view, the NCAA has moved all of its championships from fall ostensibly to spring. Now, there's still work to be done on that, but that was another decision made last week, is that all the championships will attempt to play them in the spring. But that doesn't preclude conferences or institutions from competing in the fall. It's really not easy to load all of your sports into one semester. A lot of schools, a lot of conferences would have a really difficult time doing that. And there are some conferences right now that feel like that at least there's a chance that they could get the fall played in the fall. And so there'll be some that try to play fall sports. There'll be some that play like non-conference games in the fall and maybe a conference schedule in the spring. But the NCAA tournaments in all of those fall sports would be in the spring.
Gotcha. It is going to make for a big logjam of stuff next spring, isn't it? You know, and hoping we have, that'd be a good problem to have, hoping we have that issue. But I mean, trying to squeeze everything in there together, you know, with sports that are typically in the fall and having their championships, which might normally be in November or December or something like that, and then trying to move that schedule and just having the personnel that it takes to do all those things. And there are a lot of different moving parts. It's going to really be challenging, isn't it?
And the personnel is such a key part of it because, again, go back to the very top of the list of questions and of concerns and of factors, and that's the student-athlete experience. Well, if you end up playing a greatly reduced season and you end up not being able to put together the experience for the student-athletes or for the fans for that matter, is that really the kind of experience that you want to have? And so those are questions that each school will have to answer as they kind of go through this. But boy, yeah, it is not a simple, let's just move it to spring. It's not simple.
There are lots of issues facing college athletics right now, whether it's, talking about just trying to figure out the schedule with the pandemic. You have things, related to name, image, likeness. You have, social injustice and those, issues that are going on too. How do you just try to address everything the best you can at this point?
It's so funny. You go back to where we started talking about 2018. It seems like in 2018, like the most controversial issue on the table for the D1 Council was dealing with the whole question of transfers and transfer waivers and things like that. And what are we going to do about this? We do different things in different sports. And boy, now it's like, as I said, the plate is very full. And many of these issues, they're all significant, they're all important. And some of them can be contentious issues as well. So, now when the whole NIL, the name, image, and likeness thing came up, I remember thinking, man, this is going to be really, really hard to figure out. And it is super complex. Don't let me kid you. It's incredibly complex to try to make that work the right way. But now in the COVID world, name, image, and likeness seems like it's not nearly as difficult as trying to figure out how to handle practice and playing and competition and championships in the COVID world. And then on top of that, you add in some of the issues of social unrest and so forth that are very important issues that need appropriate kind of consideration. And it's like, everything is coming at once. Everything is important, and everything really needs to be resolved, a couple of weeks ago.
Sure. Well, what's next as far as the work that you guys do?
Well, I think the next thing, and obviously winter sports, basketball is going to be really important. There's still a lot of work to do in terms of the fall sports having been moved to spring. What is that going to look like? I'm confident that the size of the brackets will be smaller because of trying to cut down on travel, trying to cut down on the number of venues, all in the name of safety here. So brackets will be smaller. How do you do brackets? What about automatic qualifiers? There are 32 conferences. If your bracket is 32, you have 32 automatic qualifiers. Is that going to be 100% of the bracket, or will there be at large, or how will that be done? Those are important questions, particularly important for a conference like the Ohio Valley Conference. And so those are things that are still yet to be determined about the fall sports. But immediately, we have to start, and I know men's basketball oversight, women's basketball oversight, and the competition oversight committees. Those three committees are already really looking long and hard at how can we do basketball and safely get a basketball season in this year. I'll just tell you, if we lose basketball for 2 years in a row, the consequences of that really, I think, can't be imagined.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? a 6-week difference would have made all the difference in terms of the NCAA tournaments being played last year. If this had just hit 6 weeks later, we'd gotten in the tournaments, and it wouldn't have seemed like it was such the crunch. I wouldn't think that it is now, where you're talking about the feeling is you pretty much have to have an NCAA tournament this year, for a lot of institutions to even just have a chance to survive and go forward.
I want to note that you said institutions. This is not just about athletics departments. There are institutions that have an existential threat facing them if this thing isn't rectified, resolved, managed in some way. And yet, at the same time, all of that is so crucial, and yet the health and safety of these student athletes and staff and officials are of primary importance. And that doesn't even count the fans.
Right.
We all want fans in the stands, but, to be honest with you, the fans are somewhere down on the list, because you got to keep those student athletes and the officials and coaches and staffs healthy. And we have to figure out a way to do that in a healthy way if there's going to be basketball tournaments.
Rich, every school is different. Every university is different. And that certainly applies to Belmont, doesn't it? Unique in its own way.
Yeah. I joke, this is sort of my standard line that I've said for years. As faculty athletics representative, one of my roles is that I'm sort of the liaison between the academic side of the institution, the faculty, and the athletic side. And my joke, and it's not a joke, I'm dead serious when I say this, is that there are a lot of faculty athletics representatives that's a very difficult place to be in, because there's so often conflicts between the academic side and the athletic side. And I often say it is such a delight and privilege to be the faculty athletics representative for Belmont, because we don't have those silo kinds of things.
Sure.
Every coach understands the importance of academics, and yet the academic side is very supportive of athletics, because they see how hard those athletes work. They also see how well they do in the classroom. And so it's an incredible environment here at Belmont, where student athletes truly are students and athletes both, not one or the other.
As we wrap up here, what message would you have to parents and athletes themselves, just the families? What kind of resources do you have for them?
I think that, and I'm not the first person to say this term or maybe offer this advice or instruction, but I think this is probably a good time for many of us to listen. These are really, really hard decisions. The council is facing hard decisions, but I'm going to tell you, university presidents and athletics directors, I pray for Scott Corley and Dr. Bob Fisher. I pray for them frequently, because they are making every day multiple decisions that quite literally impact lives and health and well-being. And so while our decisions are difficult to make, so are the decisions of university presidents, athletics directors, conference commissioners. I will tell you this, everyone involved in this is trying to do what is the best, the smartest, the most healthy and safe way to do this for those student athletes. So I would really encourage the student athletes, the parents, listen to what's being said, listen to, the conversations about how these decisions are being made. And certainly NCAA.com, there's lots of COVID related information at the NCAA website to kind of help people see how we're trying to navigate through these waters.
Rich, it's always great to see you around Mount Juliet, but I'm really looking forward to seeing you on Belmont's campus and at the Curb Center. Thanks so much for your time.
My pleasure, Kevin. Thank you.
All right. He is Dr. Rich Tyner. I'm Kevin Ingram.